I'm going to come right out the gate and say yes, but only to a certain point. There's a lot of nuance here. Firstly, let's cover our methodology. If you're not interested in this nerdy side of the thing, by all means, skip to the next chapter. To ensure consistency, for our clock speed tests, memory is set with a fixed voltage of 1.4 volts and subtimings of 36, 38, 38, 76, which was chosen as a good middle ground, with only the clock speed varying between tests. All other PC settings remain unchanged throughout. As for the subtimings tests, these were all done with the RAM again set to 1.4 volts and the speed locked to 6000 megatransfers per second. All graphics options in-game are set to high, with upscaling disabled, and any AMD Adrenalin functionality, such as FrameGen, is also disabled. Our loop takes us from the Habs in Area 18 down to my hangar, and then back again. If you saw the last video, you may be wondering why the shorter loop, instead of going to the Stanton checkpoint in Pyro. Well, there are 3 reasons. First, I found that the benchmark results were basically the same with the shorter loop, regardless of the resolution. Second is that this shorter loop allowed me to run the benchmark 6 times per setup instead of 3, which allowed for a more accurate result, as well as the ability to spot and rerun for a couple of anomalous results that did pop up. Third, this shorter loop saved me a lot of time. I do have a life, you know. Benchmarking is done using MSI Afterburner's built-in instance of Reaver Tuner, and no other software was running whilst benchmarking was done. Now, for the results. I'm doing the charts a little differently this time, so hopefully these are a little clearer. First, focusing on our average frame rate, we see a small but notable increase at all resolutions, with a higher increase at 1080p, as you'd expect. To help make this more clear, let's instead show these as a percentage increase, each time that we bump our memory speed. Going from 3200 to 4000, we see an 8% increase at 1080p, 6% at 1440, and 4% at 4K. Moving up to 5000, however, we only see a 2.5, 0.9 and 0.6 increase respectively over 4000. Moving to 6000, and this increase reduces even further, almost halving in each case. Now for the 1% lows, where we see a bit of a different story. Instead of inversely exponential gains, we see a more linear increase, at least at 1080p. At 1440p we do see it to start to drop a little towards the end, with the increase at 4K dropping sharply early on. Finally, the 0.1% lows, where again we have a fairly unique story. Going from 3200 to 4000 sees massive improvements here, but the potential gains rapidly drop off. Seeing this as a percentage gain really exemplifies just how much going from 3200 to 4000 helps here. But moving to 5000 we see much smaller improvements, which more than halve when moving to 6000. Of course, memory isn't just clock speed, it's timings. Do these matter? Actually, yes, but not in the way that you'd expect. As mentioned, each of these tests was run at 36, 38, 38, 76 timings, specifically chosen as the middle ground of speeds available from Corsair at the 6000 megatransfers per second speed. In addition to this, I also ran at 40, 40, 40, 77 and 30, 36, 36, 76. First looking at the average frame rate, and we see a rather small increase as we tighten our timings. Looking at this as a percentage, varying from CL36, shows just how small this improvement is, except at 4K, where we see a not insignificant increase. In fact, it's actually more than we would see by increasing our RAM speed. Now I actually ran the timings test twice more, and even ran the benchmarks in Monster Hunter Wilds and Cyberpunk 2077 just to make sure that I wasn't screwing something up here, but regardless I always got the exact same result. Moving on to our 1% lows, and we see the same story again. We have substantial improvements each time, much as with clock speeds, but once again timings matter even more the higher your resolution. Finally, our 1% lows and things flip back to normal, with 4K carrying the least. Much as with clock speeds, we see massive improvements with that first tightening of our timings, with rapidly diminishing returns. So, conclusion time. Memory speed does matter, especially at lower speeds where RAM shows clear bottlenecking of the CPU, but this importance only rings true up to a certain point. At 4K, anything beyond 5000 megatransfers per second is negligible improvement, with 1440p dropping off around the 6400 mark. 1080p does scale for longer, but projecting out, I don't think you're going to see much improvement beyond 7600. As for subtimings, usually marked as the CL number or cast latency, it's the first of the 4 timing numbers. These are, apparently, extremely important at high resolutions, but not as much at 1080p. With that said, here's the exact 64GB 6000 CL30 memory kit I have from Corsair. And here's the CL40 version. It's a £10 difference. There's honestly no reason to not get the CL30. One other thing to note is that higher capacity DIMMs won't clock as high, so you are going to need to balance your capacity requirements with speed. With that said, my personal recommendation then is if you need 64GB of RAM, find a memory kit with a speed of 6000 to 6400 and a cast latency in the 28 to 30 range. If you're happy with 48GB, which for a gaming only PC in my opinion is actually the ideal capacity, then opt for 7200 to 7600 with a cast latency of 34 to 36. I wouldn't recommend going down to 32GB nowadays. I personally see about 40GB in any modern games, be that Star Citizen, Monster Hunter, etc., as long as I've got Discord or anything else open in the background. Now you can run higher speeds than I've recommended, but I wouldn't recommend doing so, and that's for 2 reasons. First is the cost benefit is simply just not there. The second reason is that higher clock speeds usually means higher cast latency, which as shown at high resolutions can actually be more important than your clock speeds. And that just about covers everything. Leave any thoughts below. Did the different graph style help or hinder the information delivery? I'd love to know, as this style of video is entirely new to me, so I'm still trying to get it nailed down. With that, I thank you for watching. I'll catch y'all next time.